Okay, welcome to the LawyerFair Daily Podcast. My name is Andrew Weaver from LawyerFair, and today we have a chap called Bostjan Makarovic. Welcome, Bostjan.
Hello. Good morning.
Bostjan, good morning to you. Bostjan runs a consultancy called Aphaia and is also from Slovenia, which is a place warm to my heart, as I've just been talking off pre-recording with Bostjan. I've spent a lot of time in Slovenia, and it's a magnificent country. So welcome to you on both levels, Bostjan.
Thank you.
Now, I'm going to, as you know, and I have prepped Bostjan very carefully on this, these are very short and quick-fire daily podcasts that we try and meet with people and ideas that are of interest to us, frankly, but also we hope to the people that listen to us. So give us in a nutshell what Aphaia does.
Oh, we are a regulation and CSR consultancy. So as you're a lawyer's portal, we are not technically a law firm, although we do help people with a lot of stuff that has legal implications. And lately we've been working with quite a few startups, some of them based in Shoreditch. So essentially, our area of work focuses primarily on privacy and data protection, but also stuff like IP. So these are all things that especially startups encounter when they are developing their products and services. And now quite often we get this question, why is privacy important? Why should businesses take care about privacy? Well, on one hand, of course, it's regulation, it's compliance. So in order to get things right in the privacy and data protection area, you need to gather your data in accordance with the law. And of course, the second aspect, since we are also a CSR consultancy, is the social responsibility bit. Now, when it comes to compliance, we find that a lot of businesses base their business models, especially the startups, they base their business models on the idea that they will own data, that they will own large supplies of data, and they will be able to use this data for, let's say, big data analytics is very popular now, and be able to sell this data as well. Now, the interesting bit is, and that's sometimes where people actually are disappointed, is they say, well, do you actually own the data as a business? And quite often, I should say, you don't really own the data. You might own database, right? But what's most important, because quite often, in most cases, we are actually talking end user data. We are talking consumer data. And as such, this data is not owned by businesses. This data is actually owned by individuals. And individuals simply give businesses permission to process their data. And that is quite often the bit where it gets tricky for businesses, because quite often businesses don't think how they are going to gather data, how they are going to obtain data, and in most cases, it's still the safest way is to get consent. So if you want your databases to be robust, and if you want to avoid a situation where you might eventually have to erase your data, which might be your main asset, simply because it was not gathered properly, that can essentially mean that your business model would collapse. And everyone should try to avoid that.
Well, it's a major business issue if that happens. Listen, it's really fascinating, and I confess I'd only briefly looked at the site and had a chat with you. So you've really raised a very important point, because I think probably the majority of startup inquiries we get are related to privacy and IP and data protection. So it's a really hot topic. I mean, you've mentioned that you've been working with some startups locally, without naming names, but just give us an idea of what you've been doing for them. Has it been around this data issue?
Yeah, it's been around the data issue. So, for example, in one case, it's been about an online ticketing system. In another case, it's been about a medical app. Like in the medical field, it's a very tricky area. So those cases, for example, show us that the field is very complex. And even though you're trying to make it simple and you're trying to play by the rules, and sometimes it's difficult. So the way we normally operate, I mean, our service is essentially a subscription-based service, so it's very affordable for startups as well. But the idea is that we keep our clients in the loop. So essentially, whenever they need help, they can get it. And when they modify their services, as they develop their services, we help them get this right. So
I was going to say, Bostjan, as well, just so anybody listening thinks that this is only a startup issue, there are many companies as well that are grappling with that transfer from traditional offline to online, very established companies. So again, this is a very important issue for them to consider as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's by no means limited to startups. The point is that with startups, we often encounter this situation where you're starting from the scratch, but I shouldn't say that that generally larger businesses are always better or more compliant. Quite often, even though they do get constant legal support or have more, or are, let's say that legal services are more accessible to them, it doesn't mean that they always get it right. So this is by no means limited to startups. It's just, in case of startups, it's maybe more interesting because...
Yeah. Sorry, God, no, I was only going to say that don't underestimate that many SMEs don't use lawyers when perhaps they should do. So I'm sure there are many reasonably sized businesses who haven't been considering this in the way that they should. Bostjan, we're coming up. These are very quick fire podcasts. I'm very sorry because you're giving me some great information here. We do try and keep them. Just leave me, if you can, or leave our listeners with one really crucial tip that they should not forget about and they should be taking up straight away.
One thing, you always, before you process data, you need to register with the Information Commissioner. That's the basic thing every business should do. And the second thing would be always consider your information assets from the legal perspective. So consider on one and you should consider intellectual property, copyrights, database rights, trademarks. On the other hand, you should consider privacy and data protection aspects of the same. So these are things I would suggest. Make a checklist and see what you actually own, because quite often businesses have the problem that they don't know exactly what they own, but quite often they also think they own things they don't really own. So do a checklist and check whether that's legally acceptable.
That's brilliant. Now, of course, the other option is they go to your brilliant website, Aphaia. Give me the website address.
It's aphaia.co.uk. So it's aphaia.co.uk.
And excuse my ignorance now, because I'm sure this is obvious, but what does Aphaia mean?
Aphaia is a Greek goddess, not very popular, but still brilliant. She's essentially a goddess of fishermen's nets, and since we are primarily dealing with ICT, so information and communications networks, we somehow has transferred these fishermen's nets into networks, and that's how it works.
I love it. Bostjan Makarovic from Aphaia, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
That was the LawyerFair Daily Podcast. Thank you for listening.